I thought it would be more interesting to do a quick rundown on Biden approval today than to cover today's Valentine's Day story. But check out the website if you're interested in that. Most people don't think it's one of our most important holidays, and dinner with someone special once again beats chocolate or flowers as the preferred gift. But let's talk approval numbers. We have Joe Biden's job approval rating at 45% today. Here's the exact question wording and the results, which are a combination of the last 5 nights of data, nearly 1,700 responses. 27% of U.S. likely voters strongly approve of Joe Biden, and another 18% somewhat approve, 53% disapprove, including 45% who strongly disapprove. Over the last few months, I've routinely been asked why Joe Biden's approval isn't lower. Before I get into that, let's look at the demographic breakdowns. Women strongly approve and somewhat approve slightly more, and strongly disapprove slightly less than men, which is to be expected since women just generally lean slightly more Democratic. Here's age. Biden has a higher approval rating among younger voters, but only about 7 points more than older voters. But they also strongly approve less, so the big trend here is that younger voters are less opinionated and give Biden a significant benefit of the doubt by giving him a 28% somewhat approve and a very low 29% strongly disapprove. Here's party. 78% of Republicans disapprove, but 20% of Republicans actually approve of Joe Biden, 12% strongly. Why is Biden getting 20% Republican support? Well, those numbers are pulled up almost entirely by 18 to 39-year-old Republicans. My guess is most likely because they were surrounded by extremely strong mainstream anti-Trump sentiments for the better part of the last decade. Independents give Biden a 35% approval rating. They've been pretty range-bound in the 30s for at least the last year, but 62% of independents disapprove of Biden, 51% strongly. These are incredibly bad approval numbers for independents. Here's your proof that objective human beings are responding to the negative things they see around them and placing blame on the Biden administration. But look at Democrats. 77% of Democrats approve of Joe Biden, and that's about as high as it gets. It hasn't really been above the low 80s, but it has been down below 65% as recently as last July. So why is Biden approval stubbornly in the mid-40s? Well, for starters, with Republicans' approval of him stuck in the teens and independents stuck in the mid-30s, it really is Democrats driving his overall approval. And they really like him right now, almost as much as they did when he was sworn into office. The two biggest drivers? Most likely the Supreme Court Roe v. Wade decision, which made Democrat voters largely begin to ignore kitchen table issues like gas prices, inflation, and crime, and also the midterm elections. Democrats like winners, and even though Biden has had some pretty major calamities, the Democrats still got it done in November. Here are Joe Biden's approval numbers from his lowest reading in the last 12 months on July 21st, 2022. He only had a 36% overall approval rating and only an 18% strongly approved number. 61% disapproved, 49% strongly. The biggest change since then is absolutely the 9% pickup in strong approves, pulling 5 points from strongly disapprove and 3 points from somewhat disapprove. Here are the changes since then for total approve and total disapprove by the main demographics. Men and women gained about equally, and like I said before, he's gained the most among Democrats. But look at race. This is the major story here. He's actually gained significantly among every race except black voters, and he's actually now rated lowest with them. Now, this is incredibly new. The week of February 5th of this year, Biden's approval among black voters was 51%. So he's basically lost 8 points in a week, and it was 61% in the week before that. Now, black voters are a somewhat noisy demographic group since it is smaller, but this is incredibly real and strong signal. Why has Biden approval lost 18 points among black voters in the last 2 weeks? We would love to hear your theories. Now, let's compare Trump and Biden approval with a 4-year overlay. Here are some important points. Trump started his term with a much higher approval rating than Biden, starting at 55% and getting as high as 59% in his first month. Biden started in the low 50s and only ever got as high as 55%. Now keep in mind, Biden started his term with 2 very big storm clouds hanging over his presidency. The widely held belief that the 2020 elections were fraudulent, which our polling supports, and the threat of impending heavy-handed COVID restrictions. Biden's approval spiked to 55% in May of his first year, and that's when mask restrictions were being dropped in many states. Trump's approval plunged in the summer of his first year at the very height of the Russiagate hysteria, and he hit his lowest rating on August 2nd, 2017 at 38%. That was the lowest approval Trump ever got. He clawed his way higher and higher as cracks in the Russiagate narrative appeared, and by January of 2018, he turned a major corner, having gotten tax cuts across the finish line and driving his approval up to 51%, and keeping approval structurally between 45% and 50% for most of the rest of his remaining 3 years. Biden approval did nothing but steadily decline from May of 2021, dropping from 55% to 40% in the span of just 4 months, with the Afghanistan disaster dragging him the last 5 points down. As inflation grew and dissatisfaction with COVID restrictions mounted, Biden approval had a ceiling at about 45%, but it kept getting progressively lower lows, with his lowest at 36%, 2 points worse than Trump ever got on July 21st, 2022. That's when things changed for Biden. His approval swung wildly as his base struggled to internalize the new abortion paradigm, and then election season circled the Democrat wagons, bringing him up to a pretty tight 44 to 46% range. He got a bump to 50% after the election, settled back into the mid to high 40s, and then GarageGate temporarily knocked a few points off his score. That brings us to today, where Biden sits at 45%, and Trump was riding high 4 years ago, buoyed by an increasing stock market and tough border rhetoric. What does the future hold for Biden approval? Well, if he wants to beat Trump, he has to get his number up to 48%, which is what Trump averaged for the second half of his term. That's going to be tough to do with Republicans stuck in the teens, Independents stuck in the 30s, and Democrats nearly maxed out. He'd need to get around an 87% approval rating among Democrats to get to 48%. And the truth is, he's never been that high with Democrats. So did this video answer why Biden approval is in the mid-40s today? Approval in general tends to forget past calamities. His numbers are generally a few points worse than Trump, and he is by no means perceived to be a great president, as some new polling will point out next week. But the truth is, Democrats, especially upper-income, graduate degree-wielding, middle-aged men, kind of like him right now. Was this informative? If so, follow us on Twitter, like the video, and subscribe on YouTube or Rumble. And if you haven't signed up already, you can get a daily email digest of all our polling at the link in the video description. Thanks for watching.